Good morning to you, ladies and gentlemen. Um, I would like to thank the organizers for giving us this opportunity to discuss the issues that are related to our region. Again, my name is Abdikafi Hassan from the Institute of Climate and Environment of Simad University, which is based in Somalia. Uh, in my home country, there are the issues of climate change and also conflicts Somalia. Therefore, I wanted to know whether the conflicts in the country can be related to climate change and environmental degradation. So I understood that there are other 14 sub-Saharan African countries that are also facing the issues of conflicts and also climate change vulnerability. So in this study, I'm using a panel data of 14 countries in sub-Saharan Africa that are facing active conflicts. Even though the intensity and the scale of the conflicts are different, but the vulnerability to climate change, all the countries are the same. So the overview of this presentation consists of the introduction, where I will look at the linkage between climate change and conflicts, and also the role of climate change and conflict nexus in government stability. I also look at the objectives of the study, data collection and econometric methodology, empirical results, and policy implications from the data. So the global temperature has risen over the past decade by 1 degree Celsius above the pre-industrial level. So the deterioration of climatic conditions can be affected the well-being of the societies that are highly reliant on climate susceptible sectors such as agriculture, forestry, tourism, and forestry. So although climate change is a universal issue that affects all the countries in the world, the sub-Saharan African countries are particularly vulnerable because of their low adaptation capacity. So the discussion is surrounding whether climate change affects the security of the sub-Saharan African countries have arisen over the past few years when climate-related conflicts have increased. So a primary concern is the prospect of conflict is the most vulnerable countries that are having a history of conflicts like Somalia, Sudan, Mali, and Chad. So those countries are highly vulnerable. And other countries in sub-Saharan Africa that have history of conflict and institutional fragility. It's estimated that 250 million people will be affected by climate-related water stress, and the number can reach 700 million. So that can increase the migration of the people. And we know that sub-Saharan Africa is home to a large number of climate refugees. So natural disasters caused by climate change make the people vulnerable to disruption of their food supply chain. So this forces the people to move from their home. Then they need to move to other places in search of employment and subsistence. That brings the farmers and headers in most of the parties of the sub-Saharan Africa to clash for environmental resources. If we look at this graph, this shows the global development is in armed conflicts. So we can see that 39 states that have active conflicts in 2020, 20 of them are located in sub-Saharan Africa. 7 of them are located in MENA countries. So you can see that the sub-Saharan African countries are facing high-intensity armed conflicts and low-intensity conflicts. And we should remember that climate change is not linked to major armed conflicts or high-intensity conflicts. It's related to low-intensity conflicts, mainly intra-state conflicts. So you can observe that, unfortunately, most of the countries that are facing conflicts are in the continent. Therefore, the conflict is occur between the herders and farmers, which are clashes of agricultural land, pasture, and water availability. If you look here, the security implications of climate change, most of the evidences indicate that climate change has indirect influence on conflicts. Few studies indicate that climate change directly influences conflicts. So in 2016 to 2020, African Peace and Security Architecture Roadmap indicates that climate change as one of the components affecting the security and peace of the continent. So the few studies that indicate that climate change is related to social instability indicate that the sub-Saharan African countries are reliant on rain-fed farming. So when there is no rain, then the agricultural production is low, the agricultural income and subsistence are also declining. So that might lead to social violence. Others say that temperature is linked to conflicts. With warmer years, the conflicts are increasing. But the majority of the empirical evidences agree the indirect influence of climate change, because they say that the dynamics of conflicts are affected by factors that are other than climatic factors. So they consider climate change as a threat multiplier. So as a threat multiplier, climate change puts pressure on scarce resources. So it affects the economic of the people, and also it might displace the people. So they say conflicts can result in economic repercussions and the migration. It is very common in sub-Saharan Africa that the rural population move from practice what's called transshipment pastoralism. They move from one place to another in search of water and pasture. Therefore, if the people in the receiving locations have few resources, or few water or few pasture, then there might be competition over the scarce resources. Then that might result in the conflicts. If you look at this graph, it concludes the evidences relating to climate change and armed conflicts. The evidences that reveal climate change and conflict linkage is very weak. That climate change brings the risks of conflict, but the evidence is that armed conflicts increase the vulnerability of climate change is very strong. So when you look at the countries that are facing armed conflicts, there is climate change vulnerability. So the other link is strong compared to the other one. So whether climate change can bring conflicts depends on the government stability. Countries with deficient government institutions always face the negative consequences of climate change because of their low adaptation capacity. So climate change can affect many countries in the world. So, and there is no conflict if you look at the countries. But the reason that we have conflicts is the institutions, the quality of institutions are very weak. So that's why sub-Saharan African countries is highly fragile to these kinds of conflicts. In some places, in most vulnerable countries, climate change also poses negative effects on ongoing conflicts. Sometimes it creates new conflicts, but it always affects ongoing conflicts. Sometimes it makes it hard for humanitarian aid to access to the affected people. So the aim of this study is to look at these four variables: climate change, environmental degradation, and population growth, and government stability on internal conflicts from 1996 to 2016, a panel data. So climate change not only increases conflicts, but also hinders the achievement of Sustainable Goal 16, which is promoting peace, justice, and strong institutions. The data we are using for this study were derived from secondary sources such as the International Country Risk Guide, Dataset, Climate Change Knowledge Portal, and World Development Indicators. The selection of the sample is based on the Stockholm International Peace Research Institute that suggested that 15 countries in sub-Saharan Africa are having active armed conflicts in 2019. These countries include Burkina Faso, Burundi, Cameroon, the Central African Republic, Chad, Democratic Republic of Congo, Ethiopia, Kenya, Mali, Mozambique, Nigeria, Somalia, South Sudan, and Sudan. So the chosen countries have also historical background of armed conflicts and social unrest by institutional fragility. So the model is looks like this. Conflict is the dependent variable depending on climatic variables, environmental degradation, population growth, and government instability. So for this study, we use contemporary heterogeneous panel techniques, as panel data estimates always face what's called heterogeneity and cross-sectional dependency issues. Then we are using contemporary heterogeneous panel techniques. Also, we are using second generation unit root tests such as CADF and CIBS to determine the integration of the variables. We also look at the Pedroni and Westerland integration tests to confirm the long-run relationship among the variables. So the major findings of the study indicate that even though temperature was insignificant, in the long run, increased precipitation reduces the incidence of conflicts. So when there is more rain, then conflicts decline. This indicates that water scarcity is one of the drivers of conflicts in the continent. So a percentage increase in average rainfall reduces conflicts by 0.48%. Also, the short-run results indicate that rising temperatures exacerbate the conflicts in sub-Saharan Africa. Where warmer years, we see the risk of conflict is increasing. The other finding of this study indicate that environmental degradation and population growth to be the long-run aggravators of environmental degradation, increasing 0.33 and 0.20% respectively. So in sub-Saharan Africa, the rural population are heavily dependent on forests for their livelihood, and also a safety net in times of droughts and disasters. So environmental degradation also contributes to internal conflicts in the continent. The major finding 3 indicates that government stability is one of the components that affect the link between climate change and conflict. So when there is strong government institutions, then the likelihood of conflict declines. If the government's capability is very weak, then maybe the conflicts can arise due to climate change. So the major finding 4 of the study indicates the causality outcomes among the variables. There is a unidirectional causality from rainfall to conflicts, and a bidirectional causality between environmental degradation and conflict. So both of them cause each other. Environmental degradation causes conflicts, and conflicts exacerbate environmental degradation. Also, government instability and conflicts have bidirectional causal linkage. So based on the findings of this study, what we have found from the panel study we have taken, we recommend 4 policy recommendations to the authorities of these countries. Firstly, the authorities should formulate impactful policy interventions that incorporate climate change adaptation strategies into conflict management measures. So climate change adaptation measures only is not enough. So they need to incorporate it with conflict management measures. Secondly, the authorities should implement sustainable resource management practices that prioritize equitable access to natural resources and minimize resource-driven conflicts. Most of the conflicts in the continent are resource-driven, environmental scarcity. So they should manage that one. Also, since water is one of the main sources of conflicts in the continent, specifically in my country, when there are droughts, most of the pastoralists clash over water. Therefore, they should make sustainable water management initiatives, Finally, governments should endorse conflict resolution approaches that effectively tackle the underlying factors contributing to conflicts. Those are resource scarcity and displacement. If the displacement of the people are managed and resource scarcity also managed, then there might be or less likely to be a conflict. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much, our second presenter. That's very exciting, complementing the first presentation on land governance.